Uber drivers, hoping to make more money, have admitted they're manipulating the system to push prices up, meaning some passengers could be paying up to 3 times the cost of their trip. Drivers say they're forced to be innovative because the rideshare company doesn't pay enough and is taking a bigger cut. Michael Kaine is the National Secretary of the Transport Workers Union and he joins us now from Perth. Michael Kaine, welcome. So is this actually happening? Drivers working together in some situations to push up pricing?
Well, good afternoon, Joe. Thanks for having me. Look, this is a revelation that really demonstrates yet again that the gloss has really come off the Uber model. It's worth, before I deal with that, Joe, just looking a little bit back in history. Uber came into the country in 2012. Governments rolled out the red carpets to them. They decimated the taxi industry. We were all a little bit blinded by the snappy new app. And of course, before too long, we realised that we were getting pinged as customers with surge pricing algorithms, and we've all been there on a Saturday night and paid through our nose for an Uber ride. No reason for that other than Uber knows that it's a busy night and they can maximise profits. And the problem is that consumers are getting pinged by the Uber model, but drivers are as well. Drivers now, we know from a large survey last year, 50% of them being paid below the minimum wage. These are drivers that are treated as independent contractors. They've got to pay for their car, for their fuel, for their insurances. They don't get leave entitlements, and they're being worked to the bone. So it's important that that context is put before the Australian community. If there's anyone that should be in the gun sights here, it's Uber and the Uber model, which is exploiting consumers and exploiting drivers, Joe.
Yeah, so you've put that in context there. How often does it happen and in what situations?
Well, the reports we've had, the revelations we've had relate to confined circumstances at airports, and these drivers are doing what they can to look after themselves and their families. This is obviously not conduct that's to be condoned, but it's conduct that's entirely explainable in the context of these workers being underpaid even the minimum wage in our country. You know, we've become accustomed to the convenience of Uber, Joe, we all have, and these workers, for example, in COVID, were still taking us from A to B, putting themselves literally on the line before we had a vaccine. So they are some of the heroes of the pandemic. They are workers who are valuable in our society, but they're workers that are completely undervalued by an Uber system, an essential monopoly, where Uber can just slash their rates, and they do regularly, and these drivers have no recourse. Now, last year, Joe, the ALP government put in place a new set of standard-setting apparatus in the Fair Work Commission, and we're in the process of working through with rideshare workers right now, triggering those new laws to ensure that companies like Uber have to pay a fair wage to these workers to make sure that they can look after themselves and their families. So we're on the cusp of change in this industry, and in the meantime, of course, these revelations are unwelcome, but they are important because they shine a light on what is an exploitative system for drivers and for consumers.
Yeah, so you say it's happening for a valid reason, but what about the fact that passengers are effectively getting ripped off in the process?
Well, everyone's being ripped off by the Uber model. If you are out, as I said, on a Saturday night, you are paying through the nose for no good reason. This is not a normal contract where you have supply and demand in play. This is just, if it's a busy Saturday night, Uber knows that it can get more money from a consumer, so it jacks up the prices. And that is unhelpful. It's not what we expect. We're all being taken for a ride, but not the ride we expect, Joe. It's time for the Uber model to be held to account, and we'll be working with rideshare workers over the course of the coming months to action these new laws that the Albanese government put in place to set standards for these workers so they can make a reasonable living for themselves and their families.
And can you set out for us what a driver would get out of a $20 fare, just so viewers understand what's happening? What cut does Uber take?
Well, this is the other problem. Uber's processes are completely opaque. Drivers at their workday are completely controlled by Uber. Their pay is controlled by Uber. They don't know what they're going to receive as pay before they take a job. It just ends up in their pay packet, and it's not very much. It's the same situation for consumers. You never know when you hop in an Uber whether it's going to cost you $10 or $30. And this is an opaque system. It's long time that we reach as a community some type of reform for it. And this unwelcome news is useful because it shines a light on this exploitative model, We've got to get it right for the community. We rely on these services. These workers are doing good stuff for the community. We've got to make sure that they're taken care of as well.
You said there people getting in a cab don't know if they're going to pay $10 or $30. The beauty of Uber initially, at least, was that you would get the fare, and that was better than a taxi, whereas you could book it and you've paid for it for $15 or whatever before you get in.
Oh yeah, you know what you're going to pay before you get in, but at any given time, you don't know whether a trip from the same A to B is going to cost you $10 or $30. And this is because we've got opaque surge pricing. Uber controls that through algorithms. That's unfair for the consumer, and it's certainly unfair for the driver, who faces unilateral pay cuts month after month and who can't get enough simply to look after themselves and their family because they're being paid below the minimum wage. So it's a high time that change was made, and it's moments like this that we have to shine a light to make sure that we get that change in this Uber system.
Yeah, and you've already gone through this a little bit, but just take us through how you hope to address this. What specific way through the legislation do you hope that drivers will get a fair cut?
Well, last year the Fair Work Commission was empowered to set standards for gig workers, and we're in the process of crafting an application with rideshare workers to make sure they get a minimum wage, to make sure that they've got access to workers' compensation, to make sure they've got access to superannuation, those things that other workers in the Australian community take for granted. And to make sure, Joe, and this is the horrific thing, a horrific revelation for today, to make sure that these workers receive at least the minimum wage. That's not too much to ask, and we need to make sure that that occurs. So over the coming months, we'll be making an application to the Fair Work Commission to ensure just that, so these workers can have a reasonable livelihood for themselves and their families.
Okay, Michael Kaine, thanks for talking to us from Perth.
Thanks, Joe.